Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the session. This is about using campaigning to change the law. And what we're going to do is we're going to do what it says on the tin. The purpose of this session is going to be to learn from two very successful campaigns to understand what they did and how they did it. Now, I'm your chair. My name's Sarah Jackson. I've got a long career of campaigning behind me. Until a few years ago, I was the CEO of the campaigning work-life charity Working Families, where the focus there was, and it continues to be, rights for parents in the workplace. And I've done my share of lobbying and campaigning around maternity discrimination, around leave for fathers, and introducing and extending rights for flexible working. Now, what I want to do is introduce our two speakers. We're very privileged to be hearing today from Emma Campbell from the Alliance for Choice in Belfast. And I'm going to say, hello, Emma, are you there? Or is that just a picture of you? Emma's definitely not there, and though she was as we came in out of the green room. And also we're going to hear from Halaleh Taheri from the Middle Eastern Women in Society organisation. Halaleh, hello.
Hello, hi.
We're going to start the session by hearing from each of them in turn, and they're going to introduce their organisations and share with you what the specific injustice was that they organised around and the change that they've won, and of course, what's next. And then I'm going to talk to them together, because I really want to understand what they did and why, and how they built successful campaigns for change. And, how did they get legislators on side? How were they able to get legislation to be changed? And then it's going to be over to all of you to focus on where you find it most useful or important to dig deeper. So at that point, Rebecca from Rosa is going to be joining us, because she's keeping her eye in the meantime on the Q&A as we go along. So what I'd ask you to do is post questions and comments as they occur to you. In the Q, you'll see at the bottom, the Q&A icon is there. So post your questions and comments there. Don't use the chat box to post your questions. Use the chat box to talk to each other. And then, so Rebecca will join us as a kind of co-interviewer for this wider part of the session. And we're going to aim to try and keep things varied and interesting and to finish bang on 3:15. So I now have Emma and Halaleh, so I'm really happy to have you both. Emma, can we start with you? I mean, obviously the campaigns around abortion in Northern Ireland have got particular resonance for us all this week as we stand in solidarity with women in the United States. So perhaps you could give us an insight into the campaigns that you have been running in Northern Ireland.
Of course. I'm just going to share my screen now. I'm Emma Campbell, she, her, and I am one of the co-conveners for Alliance for Choice. And we, not me personally, but the organisation has been going since the mid-90s. You might have heard I've got a bit of a tickly throat this morning, so apologies for that. Can everybody see the screen okay?
Well, I can.
Let me see if it, okay. Let me present. There we go.
What we're seeing is the whole, yeah, that's it, perfect. Now we've got your slides.
Great. So we had a long, decades-long campaign for decriminalisation in Northern Ireland, up until we got through the law, which meant we repealed sections 58 and 59 of the Offences Against the Person Act. The effect of the law in Northern Ireland meant that almost 70,000 women and pregnant people had travelled from Northern Ireland to England to access abortions in those decades. There were also thousands of people who accessed abortions via Women on Web and Women Help Women, who are two NGOs that provide pills to people in countries around the world, like now most of the United States, lots of Africa and Asia, where the law actually prohibits abortion in quite a strict way. We always knew that England became a safety valve, really, for women and pregnant people across the whole island of Ireland. And I think one of the really tricky aspects for Alliance for Choice is that we're always campaigning across 3 jurisdictions. Obviously, we have Northern Ireland and our devolved government here, We have to also campaign in the island of Ireland, and look to the Dáil Éireann and activists across the 26 counties in the south. But of course, we also have to campaign on the United Kingdom front and in Westminster. Um, so this is a little bit about what we still need to do since decriminalisation and the campaigning that we got there. And hopefully Sarah's going to keep an eye on my time for me.
You're still all right. You've got another 3 minutes.
So I'm pretty sure most people here will agree that abortion is central to women and pregnant people's health and social outcomes. A lot of people are shocked to find out that 1 in 3 women will have at least one abortion in their lifetime. It's more common than getting your wisdom tooth out or your appendix out. And the problem with Northern Ireland is a lot of the post-conflict social concerns have really meant that things like women's equality, LGBT equality, and language rights and so forth have been kind of left languishing in the background. We have this law now. We have one of the best laws in Europe. This, I would say, probably the 3rd best law in the world. On paper, we have a much better law than England and Wales now, but the difference is we don't have the access. So the people with the power to full access are blocking the appropriate funding, information, trained staff, and general access. And they're also using the mechanisms in the Good Friday Agreement to block any further access. The current law now says that it's up to request, on request up to 12 weeks, which means you don't have to give a reason. From 12 to 24 weeks, it's just for any health or mental health reason, or if carrying on with a pregnancy is more risky than ending it, which is always the case. So continuing with a birth to full term and going through labour is 17 times more likely to result in death than an early abortion. For post 24 weeks, it's supposed to be for either the grave illness or long-term ill effect for the person who's pregnant, or if there's a serious fetal abnormality. But what the reality is, we have this brilliant law on paper that we got through the help of campaigning in Westminster with Stella Creasy and our allies in England, like the London Irish Abortion Rights Campaign and Voice for Choice. And our current reality is that we only have abortion on request up to 10 weeks. And EMA means the early medical abortion, which is the abortion by pills. So we don't have any other trained people to do any other sort of abortion services. And 12 to 24 only with grave health concerns. I would say it's even stricter than that. So it's only if they believe that it's going to be a fetal abnormality. So if they believe that the fetus is not going to survive birth. So we were a long way away from the provision that we're supposed to have. There's lots of things that we need, lots of them which are the same actually as England and Wales. So we need ways to deal with clinic harassment. We need an appropriate way to find the right information. We need an end to the misinformation from anti-choice orgs, especially those who masquerade as abortion clinics who turn out not to be clinics. There's EMA in England and Wales, which happened over COVID, and we tried really hard to get that in Northern Ireland too, as it was recommended by the World Health Organization, but it hasn't happened here yet.
So I'm going to make you stop if that's okay.
Yep, no problem.
Just to conclude that, I mean, I think what you've said very clearly is particularly to those of us who are not Northern Ireland, we think that that's the most amazing win, and it is, but there's so much still to be done. It's a good example, I think, for us all to think about, that getting your legislative change is not the end of the story at all.
Yeah, it's the start of the story.
It's the start of the story. Halaleh, can we move over to you, please? Because also you have been campaigning around, women's bodies and how men and society try to control them. That's very much your focus as well.
Thank you very much. Can I share a screen with you for my little presentation?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Hello, everybody. Can you see that?
Yeah, but at the moment we've got the full, we've got all your slides being shown and the whole of your screen, not just the image you want us to see.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Halaleh Taheri, founder and executive director for Mutual. virginity ban and hymenoplasty ban. Well, virginity stigma is quite wide over all the world, but for certain communities, quite dangerous and punishable when a young girls can't approve their virginity in the first night of the wedding. Sheet ceremonies, who is happening in South Asian, Middle Eastern, and North African mostly, and in other parts like Kurdistan, Algeria, Morocco, Egypt, quietly strong issue with the communities. And then in the first night, it requires that the girls must bleed. But scientists show that bleeding is not a point of any virginity or any show that if young girls have had intercourse before in her first time of her life. 50% of young women hasn't got any hymen, or maybe very little, or maybe perfect, that can bleed, but the rest of them can't bleed. In such a certain communities, by the custom and culture, it doesn't matter. The girls must bleed. So when I say punishable, it means that sometimes honor killing is a part of that. Sometimes girls, for example, in the UK, Heshu, the first girls have been executed by her own father. It was just because she wasn't virgin when her father find out about that, and she's been killed by her own father. And after that, it's happening a lot. A part of the punishment is the humiliation, abandonment, banish of their future life, sending back to the house of father. Community know about that, naming bad name of the girls that is not virgin, and they have just been sent. So such a traumatic situation is happening underground in our community, and then nobody until today bother about that. During the last 3 years, when we started campaigning, me and the other organization together, we wanted to show to the government that actually it's really, really important to starting ban both virginity testing and hymenoplasty. Why I mention hymenoplasty? Because virginity testing is a part of first phase when a girl must show that she's virgin, then she's allowed to have for marriage. But some of the girls who have sexual relationship or are not sure about their bleeding, they are going underground with a very, very dangerous business, searching for help for hymen repair surgery. The hymen repair surgery, sometimes it costs up to £5,000. And in such a situation, those young girls will be in huge distress for finding money. And then after that, it will be physical and emotional pain and trauma for those young girls, and sometimes up to post-traumatic stress disorder that those women are living with the rest of their life. So therefore, it's quite costly, it's quite dangerous, and emotionally and psychologically affect the life of this young person. And sometimes it doesn't work. Even they pay for this surgery, but it doesn't work. And again, at the night, they will be punished by their fiancé, by their own family. The cost, as I see, is quite expensive, and 25 clinics have been just expected in the UK that they have done it. But
how did you, Halaleh, can I move you on and just ask, what did you do to, well, you knew, you could see that this problem was here within your communities. How have you changed the law?
Exactly. When we starting with the government communication, we ask for ban virginity testing and hymenoplasty as well, because the government's interest was about the just ban virginity test. We push it as a whole coalition, and we say that it won't help if we don't ban both of them, because both of them are connected to each other. Dangerous. And then we had many panel debates with expertise, with MPs, until we make it sure as a group that we are united, and they will expect us to go step by step, helping them to understand that what is the virginity, what is the hymen, why it's working in the community, how it's working in the community, and why it's important to be banned. So at the end of the July, that will be banned, because the virginity test and hymenoplasty are criminal offense from now in Health and Care Act 2022. And then after that, so it will be clear that up to 5 years is in prison for hymen repair surgery and virginity testing, fine, or closing down the business, definitely. Even for parents who pushing, aiding or abetting for those young girls to do the virginity test and hymen repair. And it's for Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and England. So in all those 4 parts, so anybody who will help this issue, they will be punished.
So you've achieved a legal change across the United Kingdom and Northern Ireland, and there will now be penalties for anyone who is involved in virginity testing or hymenoplasties. That is a big win. But I think if we could move on and talk to both of you actually, and get the sort of understand a bit more about how you did it, because we understand what you both did. And the first thing I wanted to ask was, you've both talked about time. Halaleh, you just said it was 3 years ago you started thinking about this. Emma, I think we could safely say that abortion campaigning has been going on for a longer than that. I mean, if we'd been sitting here 5 years ago and I'd said to you, do you think the law will have changed by 2022? What would you have said to me 5 years ago? Emma?
Honestly, even when we were putting the different amendments through with Stella Creasy, a lot of the activists here were still in disbelief. And that's partly to do with having been let down by politicians so many times before. And also the number of times that we've got it really close and then it's just never quite been the thing that we wanted. So even in the early part of 2019, when the law changed, we still probably wouldn't have believed it, I would say. So yeah, it's but you have to, I suppose, the lesson that we have from that is to always ask for the most that you want rather than try and do things incrementally, I suppose would be our biggest lesson.
That I think is a really good point, because actually change tends to happen incrementally. If I think about all the campaigning that I've done, it has come bit by bit by bit, but not because we asked for bit by bit by bit. We had a vision, we knew where we needed to get to, and the politicians will take their time and will do what's acceptable. I mean, what about you, Talal?
I would say that it's a shame that we live in 2020 and still we are struggling with a misogynistic, very backward attitude in our community. And we are responsible for those young girls' lives that they have been lost for years, and they have been abandoned, they have been tortured, abused because of such an issue. We all are responsible, both government and politician. It's everyone's matter. How could we close down we close our eyes through such a situation that is existing in our community, side by side with our neighborhood? So that, I think the role of the activists and campaigners are really, really important to push it the government. No government give it the law just by easy way by themselves.
You've exactly said what I was going to say. You can't just waltz up to the doors of Parliament or the Assembly to say, hey, we want to change the law here. I mean, what did you do, Halaleh? How did you build support for the issue?
The first conference that we created, and we invited even activists from France, because they started before us. They banned the virginity testing before England. And then we invited politicians, activists from here, witnesses who are coming and talking about their problem. And then we created the first coalition in the conference and say that let's go for that, and we will be united in one word that we wanted to ban it, both of them. It was in a discussion with the government. It was a interest of that. Let's we do that by virginity testing, leave it the hymenoplasty because it's a part of our business. The businesses will be shut down, or but we fight it for that. We say that no way, we are not going back. We wanted to ban both of them because both of them is like a hens and eggs, and then you can't separate them. We really needed to secure the life of the young girls by banning both of them.
So what you did was first of all, you pulled together a coalition. You knew you'd identified the problem, you pulled together a coalition, you brought in activists from France where change had already happened. And by having a conference to air the issue, you were able to build almost like a founding coalition who were going to work together. So there was a really important thing there about finding your partners and collaborating and standing together, yes?
Collaborating with two big organizations, women organization here, Karma, Nirvana, and ICRO. We three organizations, and then we also invited many independent persons, lawyers, international lawyers, and then college, Royal College, midwifery, and then other college as well. We really wanted to be like a holistic coalition that everybody are involved from different angle, and then we wanted really to push it. The government accepted, and it accepted. I would say that that is a big success for our coalition and for UK, because nowhere else at the moment both of them are banned. It's just only in England.
What about for abortion in Northern Ireland, Emma? How did you set about it? What came first? Evidence, allies, where did you start?
It sort of always felt like getting it to the seat of government was the biggest challenge. So we tried before the topic was devolved to Northern Ireland in 2008, we tried to get the 67 Act extended to Northern Ireland, but unfortunately Gordon Brown did a deal with the DUP, and we've seen that happen on a number of occasions. Yeah. So we decided instead to build it from the community up, and we our first funded project was a community education project. So we would do a 6-week education workshop with women's community centres and trade unions, where we took them through the role of the suffragette, and then we brought them up to abortion, because we learned very quickly that in some communities you couldn't go in and just straight away talk about abortion. Mm-hmm. But if we framed it as women's experience of the 21st century, then we could give them a grounding on why bodily autonomy meant so much. And the trade unions became a really important ally and ended up funding some really important research. And it's still one of the biggest civil society groups in Northern Ireland, and I know the UK as well. So to have that behind us meant it was then easier to bring other organisations on board. So the likes of Amnesty and the Human Rights Commission of Northern Ireland only came on board in 2014. But it was really helpful to have the trade unions there first. It gave our tiny little rabble-rousing activist group a sense of legitimacy. And then, as Halaleh had said about building a broad coalition, so we did also have the Royal College of Midwives and obstetricians and gynecologists, and we had young student doctors, so there's student doctors for choice, and then there were a number of different party youth organisations, so the various different parties, but aside from the DUP in Northern Ireland, who their young party members were interested in being active, especially amongst the slightly more left, the Alliance Party, the Greens, and the People Before Profit, who are a socialist party. So I suppose we took our allies where we could, really.
But I think that's really interesting that both of you, in your completely different issues and completely different cultural settings, you've built the same sort. You've got the community activists, you've got the professionals, you've got the political campaigners, all need to be pulling together in the same direction for it to start to work. But the other thing that both of you have touched on, I mean, Halaleh, you did when we were preparing for the session, you were talking about how the mere subject of virginity testing could make some of your partners uncomfortable. And Emma, you've just said that you had to work out how about, you know, some of the communities you were going into, you couldn't just go in and say the word abortion because the doors would have shut immediately. So, you know, how did you, what did you do to get around discomfort? I mean, Halaleh, how did you get essentially a load of stuffy white blokes in shirts and ties to even want to listen to you on the subject of virginity testing?
Definitely this reaction could be from the communities because we are touching very, very sensitive issue of their customs, which lived for years and years, and sometimes there is in their gene. So fighting with this is not so easy. But we are from community, from the heart. We are the same. We help them in many other approaches. They listen to us. They trust us. So we are helping. We're starting with mothers, with in the community, with women, to encourage, empower them, and to understand the rights of the girls. And because most of the time for the virginity control is mother in charge to look after their own daughter's virginity. And cruelty or sometimes violence is happening even between mother and daughter because mother has no other choice. The man-dominated society and culture put her in such a position that look after her own daughters. So therefore, educating the community, educating mothers is really, really important. And it's on our shoulder because we speak the language of them. And then they trusted us because we are in many approaches with them and help them. So this is one of them. But it's really, really important for future generation that we ask government about that it should be from the secondary school, part of sex education, that virginity testing and hymenoplasty is a misogynistic, it's against women's rights, and then it will be taught to children, which is really important. So the next generation never think about such an issue and never exercise it on their own children.
So you've got two communities or constituencies to convince. The first is the mothers, the women who are intimately involved in it, and then you've got to get out and talk to the education department and the politicians about how do you future-proof what's been achieved, and how do you build something in so that the young people, as they're coming through, are not, you know, have the knowledge that they need to be able to take decisions about their own bodies. Yes.
Exactly. Actually, it hasn't approved 100%, but it's a lot interest in Health and Care Act. We discussed it with them that they are keen to be a subject of secondary school, boys and girls.
Emma, have you got any additional thoughts? Because I want to pick up on the Health and Care Act in a minute, but I'm just interested, you know, you talked about going into community groups and talking about women's rights more broadly, and women's any other issues that arose around, you know, opening up on the subject of abortion with people who perhaps felt uncomfortable around it?
I think there's a couple of different approaches. I think it was really important to acknowledge that in 2010 the feminist movement really grasped the power of social media, in, you know, for lots of different reasons. And Alliance for Choice were already members of the Belfast Feminist Network, and we were already members of various different women's coalitions and the Women's Policy Group in Northern Ireland. And we used any opportunity that anything to do with reproductive health came in the news or was on television, that we would make sure that we used the language that we wanted to use, the pro-choice language, and also that we really helped people try and understand how common a procedure it was, and how anyone could need an abortion. Anyone with a uterus essentially could need an abortion at any given time, and that religious communities were no exception to that. And in fact, the rates of abortion did not change according to religious belief or religious observance. And I think we we never got into schools until post decriminalisation, but we quite often did open online events, or we've been doing Zoom events since before lockdown, because we're trying to be as accessible as possible. We try and communicate. We use hopefully very easy to understand and plain language when we're doing social media campaigns. We get a lot of young people involved in terms of the creation of our artwork or logos or merchandise or whatever, so that abortion is a word that shows up a lot and doesn't, and the stigma is. I think a funny story is I sometimes forget because I'm so used to the word abortion. So when I'm leaving my son off to school, and I'll forget that I have a big abortion is normal t-shirt on. And maybe 6 or 7 years ago, I would have had side glances. But when he was in nursery or knee school, we call it here, I would get a few taps on the shoulders and people like thanking us for doing the work, and it's really gratifying to see that change. But I think it's that thing again of we were always about free, safe, legal, and local, and arguing about time limits or arguing about disability, they're all distractions from the fact that anyone who needs an abortion should have access to one, and we kind of maintain that language.
Would it be fair to say that in both of your experiences, what you're describing is about trying to hone it down to key messages? Because I remember in my early days of campaigning, I felt that I had to get everything. I had to explain everything to everybody. And I'd produce press releases that went on for 6 sides of densely typed copy because everything had to be in there. But actually, you just said it, abortion should be free, safe, legal, local. So easy. And you've talked about, explaining, pulling out of all the evidence that you could have. Your statistic is 1 in 3 women at some stage will have had at least one abortion. So clear. And I think do you think really that applies to other campaigns as well? I mean, Halaleh, did you take that sort of approach to yours?
Yes, definitely. The message is so clear, even with virginity tests, that this is a myth, and it should be educated for the wider in the society, and then everybody should understand that even it's not happening in all communities, but still these communities are part of our society, and then we should bother, and it would be a matter of us as well. Yes.
Yeah. I just wanted to pick up on that Health and Care Act, though, because it's about practically how do you get the law to change? Because obviously, Halaleh, what you had was there was obviously some other bill was going through Parliament, and you were able to get your amendment presumably put within it. Is that so? You had parliamentary allies who said to you it will work here, or how did you know what to ask for and when to ask for it?
Yeah, well, actually, from the very beginning, Richard Holden and Baroness Lee Sarge, both of them were very interested about this subject, helped us, and we stay in contact with them. We did some good workshop for them, actually, in the Parliament, and then we stop them in the corridor all the time, bringing back to the workshop and then discussing with them and then telling them. And it was a very, very exciting work from the whole coalition as a group that we were there. And they could see that the power of this coalition, that they are not going away. They are not going without the answer. It should everybody sign it. We stay in the corridor and we make sure that all MP wanted to sign it. Our petition that we did it together. And then it's going back and from again about some labiaplasty, for example, or combining this hymenoplasty with labiaplasty, which we tell them that it should be very, very clear both of them. We are talking about hymenoplasty. Whatever is a business with this all part is not at the moment our issue. Our issue is about hymenoplasty, and hymenoplasty must be treated separately. So such a discussion, we were involved, and we need you to be there. Otherwise, other people will speak on behalf of us, and they wanted to do that.
That's true. You have to be in the room. I mean, if you want the law to change, you do have to invest a lot of your own time in making sure that you build those relationships and you're always there. Emma, what about your experience? I mean,
well, we were involved in Voice for Choice, which is a UK-wide organisation with different researchers and Abortion Rights UK. And we found out that London Irish Abortion Rights and some other people were having a meeting with Stella Creasy. We had tried for years to get on Diana Johnson's, so Diana Johnson is still campaigning to try and decriminalise abortion in England and Wales, because people are still being arrested in England and Wales. But whenever we tried to get onto that bill, Diana's researchers said that we were too controversial. It's Northern Ireland, it's a devolved issue, it'll make the bill not work. But in the end, it was the mention of Northern Ireland that actually got Diana Johnson's backbencher bill debated, and a majority voted for it. But of course, backbencher bills don't make laws. So, but it I guess it measured the water in Parliament, and the difference with dealing with the Stormont Assembly and Westminster is the Stormont Assembly, at the time, they are now, but we're majority not pro-choice. Whereas in Westminster, we weren't talking about whether people were pro-choice or not, but the delicacies around devolution and when Westminster can step in and not step in. And so in order not to damage relationships with the likes of the SNP, who we wanted to vote for Westminster to overrule, we had specific meetings with the SNP. We did research on who is the state responsible for human rights breaches, what human rights breaches there were in Scotland that Westminster might step in on. We went to their annual party conference and did presentations. And so I suppose it's identifying those weak spots and working on those weak spots and making sure those people know who you are and that they can ask you questions. And in the end, Stella Creasy's approach, which was very different from Diana Johnson's, which was to find a bill, a bit like for Halaleh, a bill that was already, that had an element that could be useful. So it was the Northern Ireland Executive Formation Act. And we put the whole of the CEDAW recommendations in there on a prayer and a hope, really, and it got through. So sometimes just aiming for the stars works.
Well, thank you both very much indeed. What I'm going to do now is ask Rebecca to join us from Rosa, because I'm sure there's a lot in the Q&A, and let's widen the conversation out even more, but I'm sure everything that you've said has resulted in people going, and so, what shall I do? How does this apply? Hi, Rebecca.
Hello. Hi. Thank you.
What have you got for us? Where should we start?
One question, and obviously this is people should keep asking questions in the Q&A section of this webinar. But so a question for Halaleh and Emma is that we've seen the reversal of Roe versus Wade in the US. And obviously we've seen the rolling back of rights around the world, and Poland has also experienced that around abortion. So the kind of question is, how concerned are either of you about the rolling back of these rights that you have, and this law that you have helped to bring into force?
Rolling back?
Yeah, like how concerned are you that somebody would say, and obviously in the case of abortion, we've seen it, but do you, Halaleh, have any concerns about there being any kind of opposition to these changes in law that mean that what you've got starts to be watered down?
When we started, it wasn't so much reaction or challenge as an opposition, and neither in the parliament nor in the society, in the communities, because it was like we immediately started with the campaigning, and people from the community who wanted to reject it didn't know what's going on, and then parliament as well didn't know to react to this very, very strong coalition. So therefore, we didn't see at the moment. But definitely, as I said, in the community, we are going to face them in the community, which they are coming and explaining that, listen, in Islam, it's required woman will be a virgin in a marriage. So this is a part of ceremony. So that's why we are ready to fight it back, this ceremony, and say that virginity is a myth, whether you like it or not. And then you have chance to change this attitude rather than to staying in a position when by the law is punishable if you put any young girl in such a situation, and by the rest of the intellectual society, you are a backward person. You must change, really. So this is one. From the government, we had a little challenge on the business, actually, not about the reaction from the religious group or maybe leaders of the group. They were worried about that it may shut down the whole business of the labiaplasty or other attraction of the surgery. And we say that no. We shouldn't sell it, this important point, to them just because they are business.
Yeah.
We are fighting for that. And then from the very, very beginning, when they talk about that, we just stop it. We say that this is not going to happen. We are not going back. Whatever is your business for this part, it's not we are not dealing with that. But definitely, hymenoplasty is ours. It's our business, and we are fighting against that.
Yeah.
So stay alert, basically, is your message. Stay on it. What about Emma? What do you think about abortion rights in the UK?
I mean, I think one of the reasons that we still have the latent criminality in abortion rights in England and Wales is because any time abortion has come up in Parliament since the 67 Act has been to try and restrict it, actually, not to make it better. And there is a sense from some activists or some medics, like, let's try not to open up a way for anti-choicers to shut down the access. But in actual fact, I think what Stella Creasy is trying to do, as of yesterday, I think it is, to enshrine a right to an abortion for everyone in the United Kingdom. Because currently there are still people who can be arrested in England and Wales for accessing abortion online, or accessing abortion outside of the medical system. And it would just take some cultural changes because what is happening at the minute is that two doctors interpret the conditions that they have defenses against the 67, whereas all it would take is some very, as we've seen in America, cultural changes to happen for doctors to start interpreting that law less liberally. So it's not that I'm worried that it will happen, it happens already. And even a post-decriminalisation in Northern Ireland, we already had 2 bills trying to restrict the law that had already happened, and that's within the space of 2 years. Luckily for us, it actually galvanised. But I do think, especially with women's issues, like, they are the first to go under whenever a country lurches back to the right, as we've seen in Poland and America. So I think we just have to, unfortunately, stay constantly vigilant. And I think for that's when we have to ensure the health of a movement. So making sure that it's not just a couple of people who are bound to get older and tireder, that we have a nice, that we have a healthy, robust, dynamic movement with lots of new people constantly coming in and learning, and I think that's a good protection against those kind of pushbacks.
Well, I think you are so right on that one. It's something that I can think of. I know so many women activists who are now in their 70s who worked so hard on childcare, and now, you know, young women are having to take that campaign up again because we thought it was done. You know, we had a national childcare strategy. We had a government that said have some childcare, not enough of it, but have some childcare, and now it's all got to be done again. What other questions are there, Rebecca?
So another one is, and actually this touches on what you've just talked about, Emma, is what are the kind of weaknesses as well as the strengths of that coalition building? Both of you have really good examples of coalition building, and when you stand on a platform you can make it sound really easy. And I wondered about what the kind of whether there are challenges that you've come across around that coalition working and building that you'd like to reflect on.
So even if you can do it without naming too many embarrassing names, you know, who was the hardest? Did each of you must have had a hard nut to bring into the coalition and to keep there, and what did you do?
Yeah, for us, the problem with the coalition building, it was really useful, but it took a long time, and it took sometimes we maybe had to wait for some people to retire and new people to come in and lead an organization if they were personally very against abortion, or maybe we had to go in and do like a couple of values clarifications. We had to let them talk about it themselves. They had to go show it to their board, and so often it was a lengthy process. I would say is probably the most difficult thing for us.
Mm-hmm. About you, Halaleh?
Well, actually, one of the issue was that reaching to media from the beginning, it was hard, because media wasn't so interested from the beginning. When we on the ground, we were working with those cases. It's only media were interested after the conference, and then they heard that one of the MP as well is interested. And then they realized that this is serious. People are talking in the conference. Some MP is behind this. Some women activists have been just making noises, and then creating this a climate that media will be interested and then be part of that. It was a struggle from the beginning. However, it clashed with the COVID. And one of our problem was that we did this coalition campaign online all the time during the COVID. We didn't give up. But if it wasn't COVID, we could get a lot of support from the communities, from pioneer women from down there, from those young girls who were kept at home, and then they could be witnessing all the time. So we missed it, this part, really. It was hard, but we managed it anyway.
Emma, you look like you're about to chip in on the back of that, or was that just a...
Yeah, I think, so I'm from before I got involved with Alliance for Choice, I'm from a media background, so it was really helpful to understand how the media works. And so we would sort of try and piggyback in on anything that was on TV. We would get activists ready to all tweet in at the same time with the same message, and we would privately send it out to people. You know, if politicians did something stupid, which they are prone to do, you know, the ones that you're working against, not the ones that you're working with, then we would we would jump on that and use it as a phrase online. But also we have really good examples of people sharing their stories and experiences of abortion online. And one of the women in our activist group who had been denied an abortion and forced to give birth to a dead baby had gone and had been at the Supreme Court. Then she ran a page called In Her Shoes Northern Ireland, where people sent in their own experiences. And I think that's always really one of the most powerful things. Like some of those, we were really only doing it for our community and to build a community with each other and to help the general public understand. But what actually happened, which wasn't intentional, was that lots of these individual stories were read out in Parliament and Assembly and the newspapers. So that created a lot of momentum, and especially when it's like in every person, you know, like in every woman's story, and that it's you know, this is a normal family that it's happening to. And especially with abortion, I guess very similar to Halaleh, there's lots of myths around it, you know, the idea that it's somehow just silly young women, when in actual fact the range and diversity of people who get abortions is as vast as there are different kinds of people who can get pregnant. So I think that was really useful. And then over a good example of a social media campaign that really worked was the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland has responsibility for implementing the law. and it's quite often shortened to SOS-NI. So we turned that into a hashtag online and really pushed and said, if the law isn't introduced, we'll just provide ourselves, because we're no longer, I mean, we were already doing that work, but we were no longer at risk of arrest, so we could really openly, publicly say in it. And that campaign stopped the government closing down the clinics that we're already providing. So it's, I suppose it's like keeping your finger on the pulse of what's happening anywhere. It's exhausting, but it's working.
Yes, I think anything you do have to keep looking and see what's happening outside of you that you can jump on, you know, and use to your own ends. And Rebecca, next.
Yeah, and I think that, and because there's a question here about social media and what you think the most successful social media campaigns were. And I mean, Emma, delighted to hear you touching on In Her Shoes, because it was one of the most powerful social media campaigns. And I wondered if there were other elements, and Halaleh, what social media campaigns you found worked for your campaign?
Yes, definitely. But I wanted just to mention it one issue about the, because the subject we worked, it was so sensitive and it was just specific for certain group, and those group are kept in their, occupied with their customs, and then they are not allowed, they must be very loyal to their culture and custom. And social media always pushing that, where is data? We needed people to talk. We needed witnesses, and finding those witnesses who can come to the media, it was crucial for us, because it was so scary for them. It was so shameful, so taboo. It's not like a domestic abuse, for example, when a woman will be, and then they are going to call to the police because she has right. She knows that she's been beaten. It's a very intimate issue for these young people, for those women. So therefore, our struggle was really with that we couldn't provide. We had it cases, but they weren't ready to come and show. I think they will be ready when education is coming in, and when they will be, we openly speak about that. So always in my meetings with the government, always I mention it, that it's your role again to put it in education widely, publicly, because as much as we speak about that openly and loudly, so people hear that, people get encouraged, and then gradually those innocent women and young girls will speak up about their own situation. So that was one of the struggles that we had it with the social media. And then by the classic model, they always wanted their witnesses are coming, talking openly. That's not gonna happen with this issue that we. So.
Yeah, I mean, we've had similar issues with the abortion. The In Her Shoes was only possible after years of campaigning. So the people who put in their stories, most of them were anonymous. And a lot of the activists who ended up speaking to journalists, it was only after maybe 5 years ago they spoke anonymously to a podcaster, and then 3 years ago they spoke anonymously to a newspaper, and then suddenly their partner and their parents knew, so suddenly it was okay then 2 years ago to speak openly. So I think the longevity in that really helps, when people feel like they are supported and trusted by an organization, and that you're not just using them for their story. And to that end, we even have a page on our website, on the Alliance for Choice website, that tells journalists that we will never put them directly in contact with a woman, that we will never do that, that we won't have a specific case, that we won't go and look for abortion tragedy for them, because people have to come to us and know that they can trust us as, a provider, as well as an assigned posting organization, as well as just a campaigning organization.
I mean, listening to the two of you, it does seem.
That's it for the questions, Sarah.
Yeah, no, I got your wee message, and that's fine. And it's actually a good time for that, because we've only got 3 minutes left. And so I was going to do a very chairwomanly sort of reflection at this point, because I was thinking that what I've heard from Halaleh and Emma is that there's really kind of to be changing the law, there's two streams of work that you need to be doing. And the first is pulling your evidence and your allies together. So it's almost like you need to be able to describe the problem, right? And evidence it. You need to be able to pull your allies together. So you have to identify who are the organizations or the individuals who have influence or power and who will come on side with you. And what we've been hearing very strongly and clearly is it can take a number of years even to get all the people that you need around the table with you. And therefore you have to be patient and or work out whether you can do without them. Then you need to have your community with you. So you do need to, you can't sort of swim along on top and say, I'm doing this to you or for you. You've got to be doing with, absolutely. And once you've got those three elements in place, then it's about raising general awareness so that you're going out beyond your community and beyond those who can see that there's an issue because they believe that you're evidence. And that's where you're really having to think about the clarity of your messages and the simplicity of your messages. It's where you're going to try and pull your stories together so that where possible, you can pull people in and get them to talk to the media. And then you've got your media campaign. All that is going on one side, and the other side of it is finding your MPs or finding your legislators who are going to help you. And you have to keep plugging away on that for years and years and years, as Rebecca as well has got a campaigning background, you know, and you're looking for that moment of change, that moment that is going to make it possible for you to jump on a bill or something that is happening in the external world that suddenly got people worried about your issue. You've got to find your moment. So I would say that probably, and that is as time consuming and as hard work, and that's where you really have to learn how, whether it's your local authority, whether it's the Westminster government, the Holyrood government or the Belfast government or the Cardiff government, you have to understand how they work, what their structures are. You have to put time and resource into learning how those structures work and how do you, so you don't go in and ask for something ridiculous. Like your own bill today, that you are looking for ways that you can get your amendment in or in front of a particular select committee or an all parliamentary group. So that's my summation. I'm getting nods from all three of you actually, so I guess I've got it out there in summary. And I think we could, yeah. I would love to just keep talking to Halaleh and Emma because what you've both achieved is amazing, and there are so many hundreds, thousands of women who are going to have cause to thank you over the years to come. But I know that the next session is breathing down our necks, so we're going to stop. So huge thanks to you both, because I think not just the nuts and bolts, you've really inspired us in terms of what can be done. And it's been clear that both of you started out thinking this could be impossible, but we're going to have a go anyway. And you have both succeeded. So thank you very much, everybody. And thanks to everybody who attended the session as well. Good luck with all your campaigning.
Thank you.
Thank you all of you, and thank you Sarah as well for the chairing. It's brilliant. So the conference finishes now for today. It starts again tomorrow morning at 10:15 with a session on centering anti-racism in the women and girls sector. So we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. And thank you very much.
Cheers. Bye everybody.